Judicial Watch has zero support from this Justice Department in our efforts to uphold the counting law or the election day law that requires ballots be at least counted that only have arrived by election day. And up in Pennsylvania, DOJ is doing jack. Just because there's a new administration, Judicial Watch doesn't stop. And for instance, we haven't stopped monitoring the elections and highlighting the dangers of post-election day counting. I pointed out the election now is, 10, 12 days out of the election, 13, 14 days. And they're still counting ballots in California. I mean, I've mentioned last week how Arizona was out of control. I think there are probably still some ballots in Arizona that are being counted. And post-election day counting invites voter fraud. It undermines voter confidence, and I would argue it is illegal. And we had this big Fifth Circuit ruling that allowing ballots to come in after election day and count them is contrary to federal law. And I would argue just counting them generally for weeks after an election is just so outside the law as to be almost, not up for debate. In California, for instance, they accepted ballots, meaning they could arrive for up to 7 days after election day. So the election didn't technically end until 7 days after the law says it's supposed to end. Just ended this past Tuesday. And they've been counting ballots. Let's put it this way. I could type out and create a ballot, print it, count it, and get more ballots done and handled and processed than the California election officials. Maybe that's exactly what they're doing. Maybe that's why it's so slow. But those are the questions that come up with slow counting. And I went through in detail just how awful it is in California and in this special report earlier this week. Let's run that.
Hey everyone, Tom Fitton with Judicial Watch here. We've been monitoring what's been going on in Arizona, but there are other states where the election processes really are too slow. And one of the big violators is California, where millions of ballots remain uncounted. So we have up here, I'm going to bring my mouse, the results for California, at least as officially presented by the state. Unprocessed ballots status. So obviously you can see here that California has a lot more counties than most other states. The numbers are extraordinary in terms of the estimated total ballots remaining that still haven't been counted and are unlikely to be counted in large measure until at least next week. So let's see here. Let's go down to Los Angeles, obviously a big county. Everyone knows where Los Angeles is. They have, according to the numbers here, let me bring it up, 152,000 ballots remaining to be counted. Supposedly there'll be a next drop later today, presumably 4:30 or 7:30 Eastern time. 35,000 ballots supposedly remain to be cured. Now, cured ballots are ballots that have some type of error or are ineligible because of something happened to it, and a voter can come in and, quote, cure it, but that's a large number as well. But look at these other big numbers here. Merced County, relatively small county, 38,000 ballots still uncounted. Orange County, 173,000 ballots uncounted. Sacramento, the capital, 260,000. Riverside, 165,000. San Bernardino, here we are, 199,000. And it just gets worse and worse. 87,000 in Sonoma County. What's the other big number here? And this is Ventura County, 93,000 ballots, excuse me. So the big number here is 2.626 million ballots uncounted as of now. And there's another interesting stat I want you to see. Vote by mail ballots received after Election Day through E+7 ballots forwarded by other counties. So these are either ballots that I'm not sure what ballots forwarded by other counties mean, but certainly this covers ballots received after Election Day but are still counted under the California law. Now, you may recall that Judicial Watch just obtained from the Fifth Circuit a ruling that found that counting ballots received after Election Day is an obvious violation of federal law. It doesn't apply to California, but it shows you why these elections can be distorted and undermined by the counting of ballots received after Election Day. I would argue counting ballots after Election Day distorts what goes on. 148,000 ballots have been received after Election Day. They've been taking in ballots, and eventually they'll be counted, for 7 days, and it's only ending today, the election technically, as far as I'm concerned. So why is this bad? Because federal law requires generally that we figure out who won on Election Day. That's the way I read federal law. And it's very unusual to decide elections in post-election day counting. It ought to be unusual, but it's not unusual here in California. And if you if you're following the makeup of the House and whether or not Republicans will control it, or if they do control it, how narrow the victory or majority will be, you'll see a lot of the unknowns are in California, where there are many races where the ballots have yet to be fully counted. And I'm like talking only 60% of the ballots being counted, at least in one race I just saw before we got here. So there's a major issue in California. They're not counting their ballots timely. And what happens is when that happens, it invites voter fraud, undermines voter confidence, and as I've been shouting from the mountaintops, I think it's in plain violation of the law and ought to be ended. And if this election doesn't show why this is a disaster for election integrity in California, 2.6 million ballots not counted a week after the election, unacceptable. By the way, no matter how awful California elections are now, they'd be a lot worse, but for Judicial Watch, we had a massive settlement with Los Angeles County where they removed 1.2 million names from the rolls, cleaned up the rolls of 1.2 million names. We have a lawsuit now that's active to remove millions more, but I know the elections are cleaner in California, but there's a lot more to be done.
My colleagues just checked the latest numbers for me, and they're telling me that they have made virtually no progress. 1.4 million ballots remain uncounted in California. Unacceptable. It shows you that the election system in California is broken and corrupted. To me, it's necessarily corrupt to be counting ballots in this lackadaisical way, with really utter contempt for the confidence voters are supposed to have in a well-run election. It's not a well-run election, even if it's all innocent. You can't presume it's innocent because they're doing this shady counting process. And then up in Pennsylvania, it's being reported these left-wing countings are in the recount ignoring court orders and counting ballots they're not allowed to count. I mean, you've literally have outlaw counting up in Pennsylvania. And you see who has to come in and fight. So Judicial Watch has zero support from this Justice Department in our efforts to uphold the counting law or the election day law that requires ballots be at least counted that only have arrived by election day. And up in Pennsylvania, DOJ is doing jack. The Republicans have to go in and sue every time they get this law breaking going on. So the election's 2 weeks over, and we still have election corruption going on. Now, Judicial Watch is continuing our cases related to the counting of ballots after Election Day, which is, as I say, necessarily problematic. And of course, we got the voter roll cleanups. One of the reasons that the elections were cleaner this year and more honest was because Judicial Watch, through our litigation, our legal efforts, caused the removal of 4 million names. We cleaned up 4 million names from the rolls. 4 million in just the last year or two. But there's millions more to be cleaned up. We've got cases in Illinois, California, and Oregon. We just sued in Oregon. And as the new numbers come in from this election in terms of the registration data and who voted and such, there's probably going to be a lot more lawsuits and a lot more activity by Judicial Watch to clean up the rolls. It's an ongoing battle. So the more help we have from Congress to better enforce that law and strengthen it, the better. That would be good, right? So, we want the Justice Department to do its job. We want these agencies to do their job. We want Congress to do their job. Obviously, we want the president to do his job. But we don't rely on the system to get things done. We step up to enforce the law and advocate for the rule of law and educate the American people about what the government's up to where we can. And we'll keep on doing that. So as far as I'm concerned, even though the Trump administration, President Trump was a friend, but we still have a lot of work to do. Arguably more work than we had to do the last 4 years because there's so much cleaning up to do.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.